Good afternoon. It's not like listening to a video. Good afternoon. So I'm going to start with a survey. How many of you have listened to Salman Khan? Just raise your hand. How many of you actually have seen what Salman Khan looks like? That's almost the same number. I'm surprised at that. I was talking to him earlier, and he said most people actually can't recognize him, but if they hear him talking, they know who he is immediately. He is truly somebody who needs no introduction, but that's not going to stop me. He is, of course, the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, a nonprofit organization with a mission to provide a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. He's also the founder of the Khan Lab School, a nonprofit laboratory school in Mountain View, California, where he teaches seminars in humanities and sciences. His interest in education began while he was an undergraduate at MIT. While there, he developed math software for children with ADHD and tutored 4th and 7th grade public school students in Boston. He taught prep courses for the MCAT and was named Teacher of the Year by a national prep company. He holds 3 degrees from MIT and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He founded Khan Academy as a 501c3 nonprofit, and it today, of course, offers free lessons in math, history, grammar, physics, biology, and an endless number of subjects. Today, more than 70 million registered users access Khan Academy in dozens of languages in more than 190 countries. As a nonprofit, it relies largely upon donations, large and small, from foundations, corporations, and individuals around the world. Salman Khan himself has been profiled by 60 Minutes, featured on the cover of Forbes, and recognized as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. In his book, The One World Schoolhouse, he outlines his vision for the future of education. As I said, Khan Academy has more than 70 million users. Here at Rice, we found that 78% of the students we surveyed have used Khan Academy, and of that 78%, 95% of them found it useful. The statistics are impressive, but the statistics also boil down to stories. Earlier this semester, I sat down for coffee with one of our freshman students, who I won't name, who asked me, or I asked him rather, how he had found his way to Rice. And he said it started with our sort of product, OpenStax, when he started learning OpenStax AP courses, and that was his connection to Rice. And he became interested. But then he took an SAT practice exam and didn't do well enough, probably, to get him into Rice. A test prep company, which I won't name, offered to help him customize learning for $3,000, which he, as the son of a single mother, could not afford. So instead, he turned to Khan Academy and its SAT prep course. And so today, he is a student at Rice. So please join me in welcoming someone I think we all feel a great debt of gratitude to, who gives us a great sense of optimism about the future of education in our world. Join me in welcoming Salman Khan.
Thank you. Thanks. So, Super exciting to be here. I'm a big fan of speaking at colleges, and especially a lot of interesting ties to Rice. I grew up in Louisiana, and so a lot of some of my closest friends went here. And then, as you'll see, I'll tell the story of how Khan Academy came to be, and you'll see that Rice graduates feature prominently. And Rice was also the first university that had the somewhat questionable judgment of allowing me to deliver a graduation address. So I feel very, very close ties. Many of y'all might know that this was originally supposed to happen in October, and I fell super ill in October. So thank you for putting up with that, and I'm so excited to finally make it here. And there have been so many people who've been involved in making this possible. I want to make sure that I thank them. Obviously, President LeBron, his wife, Ping Sun. I want to thank Provost Marie Lynn Miranda, the Rice University Board of Trustees, Ann Doer, Ryan Kursky, Amy Close, Nicole Chambers, Dan Stipa, and as well John Cornwell, who helped with some of the survey data that you just heard President LeBron talk about. So I always like to start conversations like this getting a sense of folks in the room, but it sounds like a lot of y'all are already familiar with Khan Academy. I am curious, are there any teachers in the room? Or professors or teachers? Okay. And how many of y'all are Rice students? All right. How many of you are grad students? Undergrads, or I guess the rest of y'all. And then how many of you are from outside of the Rice? Okay. So we have a pretty fun crowd here. Well, as was introduced, Khan Academy, we're this not-for-profit with a mission of a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And a lot of folks associate it with video lessons that I started making for my family members actually over 10 years ago, almost 13, 14 years ago now. And it is that, but as you'll see over the course of this conversation, and it will be a conversation, we're going to have time for Q&A, we think it's much, much more than just videos. But just to get everyone on the same page, I will start with a montage of what Khan Academy videos look like.
Of these interactions are just due to the gravity.
This is an age right after Isaac Newton.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hotter. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see.
Oh, let's start that over. If we go back up, I will click.
Of these interactions are just due to the gravity.
This is an age right after Isaac Newton.
I'm told the humidity makes it feel hotter. Why is this?
Excellent question, LeBron.
And you can just see the pleasure he had.
The right to privacy as such is not spelled out in the Constitution. Of course, the word liberty is.
Things actually can interbreed, although for these two in particular, it seems like the mechanics would get kind of difficult.
And I can keep playing around with these numbers and see what kind of colors I can come up with.
If this does not blow your mind, then you have no emotion.
I thought y'all would appreciate Euler's identity, especially here at Rice. But as I mentioned, it's much more than videos. What you see here, these are just screenshots. Some of y'all might have used this in high school or even using it today, covering everything from early learning through calculus and statistics. You see, it's not just science and math. We have practice and videos and instruction in the humanities as well. We have tools for teachers so that they can see what students are working on and they can do focused interventions with them. This just gives you a little bit of the breadth. It's, our goal is to cover all of the core academic subjects from early learning through the first couple of years of college. And this is a snapshot of where we are now. President LeBron kind of referenced these numbers. And before I talk more about where we are and where we're going, I think it'll be fun for us to kind of talk about how all of this started. I think some of y'all have a sense of where this all started as a family project, but maybe not the full picture. And it'll also maybe inform us on where we could go. So if you rewind back to 2004, I was a year out of business school. I was living in Boston. I was working at an investment firm as an analyst. And I had family that was visiting me from New Orleans, where I was born and raised, right after my wedding. And it just came out of conversation that my 12-year-old cousin, her mom, Najratanti, she told me that, Nadia's been having trouble with math. You might want to talk to her a bit about it. When Nadia came into the room, I said, Nadia, what's going on? And she said, well, I took a placement test last year that had unit conversion on it. I just don't get unit conversion. And I did badly, and because of that, I'm now in a slower math class. And I took that pretty seriously. It's where you get tracked in 7th grade in a traditional system can have a lot of implications. So I told Nadia, I was like, look, I'm 100% sure you are capable of understanding unit conversion. So I offered, I said, hey, how about when you go back to New Orleans, we get on the phone every night and maybe use the internet, instant messenger, whatever, to be able to tutor. I'm happy to tutor you. And so she agreed. And so she goes back every day after work for me, after school for her. We got on the phone for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And slowly but surely, frankly, the first few weeks, it was just deprogramming her brain, making her realize that she could learn it. But then she got unit conversion, she got caught up with her class, then she frankly got a little ahead of her class, at which point I became what I call a tiger cousin. And I called up her school. I'm sure you educators appreciate phone calls like this. And then I said, you know, I really think Nadia Rehman should be able to retake that placement test from last year. They said, who are you? I said, I'm her cousin. And they actually let her retake that placement test. And that same Nadia, who was being placed into for lack of a better word, a remedial math class, was now put into an advanced math class. So I was pretty excited. It was a very small intervention on my part. I was actually really enjoying being able to bond with my younger cousin, who was 2,000 miles away. So then I started working with her younger brothers. And then over the next 18 months or so, a few things happened. I was working for a very small investment firm. My boss's, it was just me and my boss and his dog. And my boss's wife became a professor at Stanford Law School. So we moved the firm, so to speak, out to the Bay Area. But more relevant to this story, word got around my family that free tutoring was going on. And so I found myself every day after work with 10, 15 cousins, family, friends all over the country, trying to help them with their math, their science, whatever else. And I saw, even at that early stage, I saw a pretty consistent pattern. A lot of them might have been reasonably good students, B students, A students, but their struggling was not because they weren't able to learn it or that the subject matter was difficult. It was because they had gaps from 5th grade or 6th grade or 7th grade. They didn't know exactly what happens when you raise something to the 0th power, or how you divide a 2-digit decimal. And so having a background in software, before business school, I worked in math and computer science. I started saying, hey, it would be fun if I could write something for them that gives them as much practice as they need. And I remember, and that was the first Khan Academy. It had nothing to do with videos. And I was at a dinner party. This is now November of 2006. And I was showing off this project. All my friends knew that I had this crazy project with my family, that I was tutoring them, and I was working on this software for just my family. And in the back of my mind, I said, maybe it'll be useful for other folks. And the host of the dinner party said, well, this is all cool, Sal, this practice software you're creating, but how are you scaling up your actual lessons? And I said, that's a good question. His name's Zuli Ramzan. And he said, I said, that's a good point, Zuli. I'm actually having trouble doing with even 10, 15 family members what I was able to do with just Nadia and her brothers. And he says, well, why don't you record your lessons, the ones that you're hearing a lot of need for, as videos and upload them onto YouTube for your family? And I immediately said, no, that is a horrible idea. YouTube is for cats playing piano. It is not for serious mathematics. But I went home that weekend. I got over the idea that it was not my idea. And it's true. And I gave it a shot. And those first videos, they're still up there. You could actually go on and search by date uploaded. So November 2006, there's things that I saw that a lot of my cousins were having trouble with. And they were meant to complement that exercise platform. So it was, least common multiple and adding fractions with unlike denominators and exponents and things like that. And I started telling my cousins, hey, I'm making this for you. Send me requests. And you could watch it at your own time and pace, and that when we get on the phone, we can dig a little bit deeper. And after about a month of that, I asked them for feedback. And they famously and somewhat backhandedly told me that they like me better on YouTube than in person. And it's counterintuitive at first, but when you really put yourself in the shoes of a learner, and we've all been there, it makes a lot of sense that the first time you're trying to really grasp a concept that might seem a little intimidating, no matter how non-judgmental your tutor, your teacher, your parent, your cousin is, it feels stressful when they say, okay, A leads to B, which leads to C. It makes sense, right? And you go, oh, yeah, it makes sense. And then 5 hours later, you're trying to do it on your own. You're like, what did she say? What did he say? How did that make sense? You might be in algebra class and have a deficiency in basic arithmetic and be embarrassed about it. You don't want to let someone know that you have that deficiency, but now there was no judgment with the videos. They weren't saying that they didn't appreciate the human in their life. I mean, they did very clearly say that they really appreciated that I was taking interest, that I was motivating them, that I was able to jump in where the videos or the practice platform couldn't meet their needs. So I took it as positive feedback. I kept going. And it just happened to be public on YouTube, and it soon became clear that people who were not my family were watching. And at first, I just saw the view count slowly creep up. Then comments started to come in. Some of the early comments were just simple thank yous. Even that I thought was a pretty big deal. I don't know how much time you spend on YouTube. Most of the comments are not thank you. They're a little bit edgy. But then they got more intense. Things like, this is the reason I was able to get an A in my algebra class. This is the reason why I didn't flunk out of high school. This is the reason why I now not only feel confident to be, go into physics, but I'm inspired by it. And so I remember in those early days, there was a letter. I brought my wife over. I was like, this is incredible. This was early 2007 now. And it was a mother who said that her two of her children had learning disabilities, and it was only because of the content that they were able to get from what was then called Khan Academy that they were able to keep up with their class. And because of that, her and her entire family were praying for me and my entire family every night. And you got to appreciate how especially special that was for me. You have to remember, my day job, I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I wasn't used to people praying for me, at least in that way. So I kept going, and by fall of 2009, there was several tens of thousands of people using the videos for sure, and then even the little software platform that I was doing. In fact, so many people were trying to set up that the platform wasn't able to handle it, and I didn't even have the time to put into it. And it felt like there was a there that, hey, this was already reaching several, I think it was about 50,000 people every month. Maybe one day it could reach million people, maybe one day 50 million people, maybe even more than that. I let myself really dream, so I sat down with my wife. We were saving money essentially to buy a house, and our first child had just been born. But it felt like, hey, let's give it a shot. And I'd already had some early conversations with some foundations who were kind of giving me some positive feedback, like, this is really cool. Like, this could really help a lot of learners. And so I took the plunge. I quit my day job, and I decided to work on Khan Academy full time. I set it up as a not-for-profit organization. And anytime you do anything entrepreneurial, whether it's for-profit or non-profit, you almost have to start with that delusional optimism. You have to start thinking, surely the world will recognize the value here, the social return on investment. But what typically happens is you take the plunge and then you come to terms with reality. I started having a lot of conversations with a lot of folks, and I got a lot of, by meeting 3 or 4, oh, this isn't exactly what we would fund, or it's a little different than our portfolio, or our budget this year has been allocated. And so you can imagine 7, 8 months into that, my expenses had gone up with the new baby. We were digging into our savings about $4,000 or $5,000 every month. It was incredibly stressful. I literally would wake up, middle of the night. What have I done to my career, to my family, et cetera, et cetera? I was getting a few $100s of random donations off of PayPal at the time. If there's any of you, thank you. But it was a tough time. By May of 2010, this is about 10 months into this, I was very seriously saying, look, I don't want to give this up ever, but I probably need to go and go back to what I was doing if they would even have me. And it was right at around that time, all of a sudden a $10,000 donation came in. And it came from, I looked it up, it was an email address, Ann Doer. I immediately emailed her back and said, thank you so much for this incredibly generous donation. This is the largest donation that Khan Academy has ever received. If we were a physical school, you would now have a building named after you, which I hear is a good deal. And Ann immediately responded back saying, well, I'm local, I'm in the neighboring town. I've been using Khan Academy with my daughters, I've been using it myself. I'd love to catch lunch and learn more about what you're doing. And so I think it was maybe a week later, we were at lunch at an Indian buffet restaurant, and over lunch, Ann asked, so, what's your goal here? And I said, look, when you set it up as a not-for-profit, there's a form the IRS gives you, and part of that form is like mission colon, and they give you about a line and a half. And I filled out a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And Ann said, well, that's ambitious. How do you see yourself doing that? And I said, to be clear, it's a mission statement. I don't think I'm just going to be able to check it off this weekend and then move on to healthcare. Or I have some ideas, so if we want to. But I showed her. I showed her that the view count and the usage was growing exponentially. I used to walk around with this notebook of testimonials from people all over the world. I showed her the software that I had been working on. I said, it's not just about videos, it's about practice, so kids can get as much practice as they need. That it can flex to where the students are and ensure that they can master concepts. Tools for teachers, so that they can do focused interventions based on how the students are performing, and that we can internationalize it to all the languages of the world. And Ann said, well, you've actually made a surprising amount of progress. I only have one question. How are you supporting yourself? And in as proud of a way as possible, I said, I'm not. And so she processes that. We pay the bill. About 10 minutes later, I'm driving into my driveway in Mountain View, and I get a text message from Ann, and it says, you really need to be supporting yourself. I've just wired you $100,000. So that was a good day. That was a little bit. And frankly, that was the beginning of a whole series of crazier and crazier in a very positive sense events. A month or two later, so May of 2010 now, or actually June of 2010, I was running a summer camp for middle school students. So the whole reason I was interested in summer camps, I never thought that online education was somehow going to be a replacement for physical education. But what I did think is, hey, if online education can do information delivery at a student's time and pace, if it can give practice at a student's time and pace, it could liberate the physical classroom to do more interactivity, to do more simulations, Socratic dialogue, peer-to-peer tutoring. And so I was running these summer camps to really experiment with that. And so I was in the middle of exactly one of those simulations where I had 6 7th graders playing a game of Risk, while the other 20 were trading securities based on the outcome of the game of Risk. Good game. One kid invented naked short selling on his own. He didn't know that there are people making a lot of money doing that. But while I was literally in this trading floor of 7th graders, I start getting text messages from Ann, which you can imagine I now take very seriously. And there were 5 or 6 of them. They were kind of cryptic in what order they came in, but they essentially read, this is Ann texting, she says, I'm in Aspen, Colorado at the Aspen Ideas Festival, main pavilion, Walter Isaacson interviewing Bill Gates, last 5 minutes talking about Khan Academy. So I didn't know what to make of this, so I immediately boot the nearest 7th grader off of a computer, and I start looking for some evidence of this thing that Ann is referring to. And actually, after about 5 minutes, I was actually able to find the footage, and this is what I saw.
There's a new website that I've just been using with my kids recently called Khan Academy, K-H-A-N. Just one guy doing some unbelievable 15-minute tutorials. My favorite vignette is that guy, Salman Khan. He was a hedge fund guy making lots of money, and he quit to do these little web videos. And so we have moved, I'd say, about 160 IQ points from the hedge fund category into the teaching many people in a leveraged way category. So, that was a good day, the day that his wife let him quit his job.
So you could imagine I was literally, when I was seeing that, I was shaking. I was like, is this really happening? That was for, this content was for Nadia, not Bill Gates. And that night, I went home. I remember talking to my wife, and I showed her this, and I remember talking to her. I was like, what do I do now? What's the protocol here? Do I call him? Assuming he's not listed. And they just kind of left me in that limbo state for about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I'm in my walk-in closet, which at the time was the world headquarters of Khan Academy, and I'm about to record a video, and my cell phone rings. I see it's a Seattle number. I answer it. Hello? Hi, this is Larry Cohen. I'm Bill Gates' chief of staff. You might have heard that Bill's a fan. Yeah, I heard that. And if you're free over the next few weeks, we'd love to fly up to Seattle and learn more about what you're doing and maybe ways to collaborate. And I was looking at my calendar for the month, completely blank. So yeah, I got to do some laundry and cut my nails, but maybe next Wednesday could work. So we had that meeting, and it was eerily similar to that meeting with Anne. At the same time, folks from Google reached out, where they were looking to do some projects that could have really scalable impact for the planet. And so all of a sudden, by fall of 2010, it came together where we got some of that initial funding to become a real organization, to start hiring up a small engineering team, get a little office space, and become the beginning of a real organization. And what we immediately started working on was the software part of Khan Academy. If you just go to the next slide. And so these are screenshots that some of y'all might be familiar with, that you might have done when you were learning algebra on Khan Academy. This is on our mobile version of it, where students do practice. And what happens is, as the system sees that, hey, you've mastered one concept, the one on the left is slope of the line, it will then say, okay, now you're ready for a more advanced concept, where this is graphing a line, and then once you've mastered that, you're now ready for a more advanced concept, where maybe what is this? This is a systems of equations. And in a lot of ways, that's common sense. That's the way that you would play a video game. You keep working on level 1 until you master it, and you go to level 2. It's the way you learn a musical instrument. You keep working on the more basic piece, and when you've mastered it, you go to an advanced piece. But what we point out is that this is not the way that a traditional academic model is structured. In a traditional academic model, and this was a recent drawing that I just added to this presentation, so we'll see how it goes. But in a traditional academic model, students are grouped together initially by age, and then usually age and perceived ability, and they're shepherded together at a fixed pace. And what typically happens is they'll go to a lecture, they'll be told about, let's just say it's pre-algebra, basic exponents. Then they'll go do some homework. Next day they'll review the homework, get another lecture, homework. Then you have a test. And on that test, maybe I get an 80%, maybe you get a 90%, maybe you got a 95%, and that even though that test has identified gaps, what was that 20% that I didn't know? Even that A student, what was the 5% she didn't know? Maybe it was a careless error, or maybe it was something really important. What happens when you raise something to the 0th power? Even though we've identified those gaps, the whole class is forced to move to the next concept. A concept that's likely going to build on those gaps. We might have to now learn negative exponents or logarithms. And especially the student who got 80 or 70% on the first one, it's going to be really difficult to work on the next thing. And those gaps just keep accumulating as you're pushed ahead in the system, even the 5% gap, the 10% gap here and there. And then all of a sudden, what typically happens is a lot of kids hit algebra class, and they hit a wall. And it's not because algebra is tough. It's not because they're not bright. It's because that equation on the board has something to the 0th power, is dividing by a decimal that they're a little bit shaky on. And it's very hard for an algebra teacher to address that need, or they might not even know about that need. And to kind of appreciate how absurd that is, imagine if we did other things in our life that way. Say home building. So, you bring in the contractor, and you say, we have 2 weeks to build this foundation. Do what you can. And so they do what it can. Maybe it rains. Maybe some of the supplies don't show up. And then so 2 weeks later, you bring in the inspector. And actually, I have a drawing for this too. You bring in the inspector, and the inspector says, okay, that part's not quite up to code. That part's concrete's still wet. I'll give it an 80%. And you say, great, that's a C. Let's build the first floor. So you build the first floor. We have 3 weeks. Do what you can. 3 weeks later, the inspector says, okay, that's a 70%. You say, great, that's a C minus or a D plus. Let's build a second floor, third floor. And all of a sudden, while you're building the second or third floor, the whole structure collapses. And if your reaction to that is the reaction that we typically have in education, you say, oh, maybe we had a bad contractor, or maybe we needed different building standards, or maybe we needed more inspection, which is kind of tests. And maybe that's part of it, but what's really going on is we had a flawed process. We are artificially constraining when and how long to work on something, pretty much ensuring a variable outcome, A, B, C, D, F, and ensuring that these gaps are going to accumulate. And then we kept building on it until it collapses. While the other way to do it, which is this notion of mastery learning, not my idea, it comes from Benjamin Bloom, and frankly even before him, is do it the other way around. Instead of holding fixed when and how long you learn something with a variable outcome, hold fixed that everyone should master the concepts and not have these debilitating Swiss cheese gaps. And then they're more likely to not hit a wall later on. And so what's fixed is the standard, and what's variable is when and how long they work on it. And to kind of appreciate, just how much potential there is in the world if we let people learn this way, I'll show you this next video.
So I actually dropped out of high school twice, both during my freshman year. And when I eventually came back, I was put in sort of lower level math and science classes because I was so behind. Then I discovered Khan Academy, and I was able to skip 2 years worth of math just through using the site. And I came into school, I took the exam with students who had been enrolled in the class all year, and I was actually able to get the highest or the second highest scores in the class. So for me, Khan Academy really changed the trajectory of my entire life, because without it, I don't think I ever really would have been inspired to learn and to love math and to love science. I ended up graduating as a valedictorian and going on to Princeton, where I'm now a computer science major, and I'm absolutely passionate about learning, about computers, about math, about science. And without Khan Academy, I don't think that these things would really matter to me the way that they do today.
There's a fun epilogue to that story when we said, hey, you're a CS major, we have internships. And so he actually was an intern, and we ended up giving him a full-time offer. So in a very, and he was an incredible engineer for us. So in a very strange way, we're helping to solve our own labor problems. So it's, but as I mentioned, a lot of what we're doing, and we're getting more and more focused on, is what can we do inside the classroom? How can we help more and more teachers? And what I'm about to show you is actually something I was just looking on. I just started doing this, like looking on social media and seeing what are people saying about Khan Academy. And this is actually just from a couple of weeks ago. This teacher posted this that I thought was a pretty powerful example and represents what we want to happen in classrooms. So she wrote, Miss Melissa Smith, I have cerebral palsy at age 49. I'm in my 24th year of teaching students with special needs. I use Khan Academy every day to refresh my memory of how to understand and teach math to my high school students. I love being able to be a student of math before I teach my algebra class. I now love math as a student and teacher. Khan Academy guides me every day to being the best teacher I can be so my students can be their best too. Math is so much fun today. A lifelong student, I envision myself learning as many Khan Academy courses as I can. And later she goes, Khan Academy quenches my thirst for learning every day. So this is the kind of mindset that we hope that we can bring to more and more teachers, and we give them the tools and the supports so they can really leverage these tools and the mastery learning in their classrooms. And to get a feel of what the energy is like, I'll show you this next video. This is actually from a learning challenge that we do every year now called LearnStorm. And these were the children looking at their collective progress. Because obviously we can do individualized learning for each student, but we can also make them a collective team on a classroom level guided by their teacher. And so that's what you're seeing here, when you're seeing students seeing that they've reached some of their goals. It's just fun to look at. As President LeBron had introduced, a relatively new thing, but I'm guessing some of y'all who might be freshmen or sophomore use it yourself, is about 3 years ago, the College Board reached out to us and said, we really like what you're doing. We really believe in kind of the individualized personal practice, the mastery learning. I had done some very basic SAT stuff, and they're like, we like that when y'all cover this material, you're not teaching just how to game the test. We do some test-taking strategy, but you're saying that you need to learn the material so that you actually do become college ready. And so the College Board said, how about we partner together to create the world's best test prep that happens to be free and really try to level the playing field. And so this is a video that came out right when it was launched about almost 2 years ago to give you a sense of that project.
Today is the last day students around the country will take the SAT in its current form. That's because starting in March, a new test with lots of changes will be there for high schoolers. Here's NBC's Ann Thompson.
I wanted to start my own business specializing in robotics.
I think I'd like to be a chemist.
The first hurdle to achieving those dreams, the SAT. Today is the last day students will be offered the test in its current form. The new SAT promises to be quite different. All high school students like Amelia Teneo and Minkailu Kanute now also have access to free online tutoring from the Khan Academy.
The software itself acts like a tutor. It shows you, hey, you should probably work on this.
Complete with points and badges.
And once you get to like the more advanced stuff, you get like really cool badges.
Sounds like a video game.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this question asking?
Students have been practicing for months with sample tests meant to mirror the new SAT exam beginning in March.
And how have you done on the mock SATs?
I have done well. By the time that I went to Mach 2, I boosted my scores by 200 points.
Building confidence along the way to achieve new possibilities in the future. For Today, Ann Thompson, NBC News, The Bronx.
And one of the things that's been really exciting about that partnership is we started to think even bigger and bigger. So the PSAT NMSQT is a test that most of us took at some point in our life. Back when I took the PSAT, it was this random test that you took in 10th or 11th grade. If you happened to do well on it, colleges would start sending you some materials and there might be some scholarship opportunities. But for most students, it was this random test. Now when you take the PSAT NMSQT, it acts as a diagnostic for Khan Academy. So you get your score in 10th or 11th grade, but it's really an invitation to personalized practice. And what's also exciting about that is it allows us, if the students give us permission, to be able to see what the efficacy of that work on Khan Academy is and how much the gain is from the PSAT to the SAT. And so now we're able to do efficacy studies on a scale that would have seemed like science fiction even 10 years ago, where every year we're looking at several hundreds of thousands of kids and seeing where they were, what kind of work they do on Khan Academy, and then how that yields. And we're seeing that even 20 hours of that type of practice, and that's 20 hours over roughly 18 months to 2 years, so it's over a long period of time, is yielding, or is associated with twice the expected gain that students typically see from the PSAT to the SAT. And it keeps going. And so there's some really interesting data there. There's a study, outside of the PSAT work, there's some really interesting studies where we're seeing where if students are able to work on problems that are at their level, that they're able to master concepts, fill in their Swiss cheese gaps, that even an hour of that type of practice is yielding 20, 30% greater than expected gains. In fact, the Brazil study was that, and that actually was a causal study where they had a control group and an experimental group and randomly assigned them. But we've also run some very large studies in Idaho as well. As I say, all of this is due to a lot more than just me. There's all sorts of folks who now are out there helping support Khan Academy. We're philanthropically supported, and so there's corporate sponsors, there's philanthropists. Ann and John Doerr, Ann, who I mentioned in the beginning, they are Rice alum, so I think I wouldn't be here if Rice didn't help them do all the incredible things that they do. And Ann's actually in the room, but I don't want to make her feel awkward. So everything I've just talked about has been mostly the world that we live in or we've grown up in, most of us, the English-speaking world, the developed world. Some of y'all might be wondering about what about the rest of the planet? And all of these are pictures of Khan Academy being taken to villages and all sorts of interesting places in the world. This work is done primarily by other folks, by other not-for-profits, NGOs. There's even an offline version called Khan Academy Light, KA Light, that another not-for-profit has really been driving, and frankly, not just around the world, but they've even been taking it into places like prisons with some really, really interesting outcomes. And all of these are pretty exciting stories. Probably the most exciting ones in the top right. I used to give talks like this and say, who knows, maybe one day it'll be used in Mongolia, just trying to imagine the furthest place on the planet. And then a few months later, I got a video testimonial from Mongolia. And it was the young woman in the top right, who was at the time 16. And she just says, hey, I use Khan Academy, I really enjoyed it, it's helping me learn math, et cetera, et cetera. And when I saw that, I immediately assumed, okay, she must be middle class, upper middle class. Her English was quite good. She clearly had access to a computer and internet. But then I read the text of her email more closely, and it turns out that there was a group of engineers who were using all of their vacation time to travel to Mongolia and set up computer labs in orphanages. And what you see in the top right there, those were the orphan girls using Khan Academy, and Zaya was one of those orphans. And what has made that story, and it's kind of parallels Charlie's story, even more exciting, is that once Zaya graduated from high school, she has now become one of the top contributors to Khan Academy in the Mongolian language. So it's just this multiplier effect. You allow people to tap into their potential, just bigger and bigger, and more positive things can happen for more folks. And this is a story that came out a little over a year ago. I was at my desk one day and I was just reading emails, and someone reached out and they told me the story about this young woman in Afghanistan named Sultana, who at age 12 was forbidden from going to school. The Taliban had taken over her town and just forbade all the young women from going to school, threatened her directly with things like acid attack, horrible things, so she didn't go to school. And she was at home doing chores all day, and her brother-in-law saw that she really was precocious and wanted to learn, and so he got her a laptop with internet. And so she was determined to learn. She actually teaches herself English off of the internet, which is a little scary, but it kind of worked for her. And she wanted reading material in English, and so a family member was able to get her a Time magazine in English that happened to have an article about Khan Academy in it. And so Sultana, at this point 13 or 14 years old, says, "This is what I need." So, to hear her tell the story, every waking hour when she wasn't cooking dinner or cleaning floors or whatever, and she was doing literally 10 or 12 hours of chores a day, she was online learning. And she went from not even a middle school level, at a late elementary school level, all the way through algebra and trigonometry and calculus and physics and statistics, chemistry, biology, and then she becomes determined. She wants to become a theoretical physicist. And so she says she wants to study theoretical physics. She wants to do it in the United States. So she needs to take the SAT. It's not offered in Afghanistan. So she smuggles herself into Pakistan on an illegal 30-hour journey to take the SAT. So any of y'all with younger siblings who are grumbling about showing up on a Saturday, tell them this story. She does shockingly well for someone who is self-taught English and self-taught, frankly, everything. And so that's where someone that she had met through some exchange program online reached out to me. And so I immediately started saying, wow, this is an incredible story. I started emailing people. Luckily, somehow, and it wasn't because of me, Nicholas Kristof found out about it. And he wrote this piece, Meet Sultana, the Taliban's Worst Fear. And he essentially just laid out the story, and this is in the New York Times, just really about how much potential is out there. And it was because of this that she was able to get political asylum. And she is now finishing up her undergraduate at Arizona State, and she is already collaborating in theoretical physics with a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. So very, very, very exciting stuff. And it makes us, all appreciate how important it is, for every sultana that we find out about, how many millions of sultanas are out there who don't get that opportunity. And so we want to reach as many as possible. These are all kind of the splash pages. Khan Academy is available in some form in over 30 languages. These are just the screens of a few of them. And it's not just the videos, it's the exercise platform, the teacher tools, etc. But just to get a feel of what the videos themselves look like in other languages, I'll show you this video.
Me comí 2 cuartos de pizza.
L'hypoténuse commune, ok.
7, 13, 15.
और मैं इस हाथ से इस ब्लॉक को धकेलने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ इस डायरेक्शन में.
توجد قطعتين من معدن النحاس والزنك.
P R به توان 2 ضرب داره.
הגיעה הנקודה שבה שוק הסיום של הזווית חותכת את מעגל היחידה.
Ili muweze kuelewa na kuweza.
Into yokuqala kufuneka siyazi kukuba kubani
16 bölü 16 1'e eşittir.
Muitas e muitas outras coisas importantes.
I'm Zaya from Mongolia. Your videos are so interesting and funny. Make more lessons.
I watch that when I get lazy. So these are just more pictures of Khan Academy being used throughout the world. And whenever you see things like this or we read the testimonials, it reminds me, and I remind all of y'all, Khan Academy is much more than me now. We're over 200 full-time employees. There's actually hundreds of thousands of people who've contributed as little as $1 or $2 to the effort. There's 14,000 people who've helped us subtitle and translate content. Obviously, millions of teachers and learners who are helping us do what we do. And what I tell all of them, and when you see these types of pictures and you hear these types of stories, it just feels like we're at a special moment in history, where if we were to, and to appreciate it, I'll give you a little bit of a thought experiment. If you went back in time about 500-600 years to Western Europe, which even then was one of the more literate parts of the planet, you would have seen that about 15% of the population was capable of reading, about 20% of men and sub 10% for women. And I suspect that if you ask someone who could read, say a member of the clergy, what percent of the population do you think is even capable of reading? They would have said, well, maybe 20, 30, 40% with a great education system. Well, you fast forward today, we know that would have been a wildly pessimistic prediction. that because of free mass public education that happened around the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries, pretty close to 100% of the population is for sure capable, and pretty close to 100% of the population in countries like the United States can actually read. But if I were to ask you all a similar thought experiment today, what percentage of the population do you think is capable of contributing to theoretical research, or becoming an engineer, or writing the next great novel, or being a tech entrepreneur, or finding the cure for cancer? I think a lot of us would say, well, today that number is sub 5%, but maybe with a great education system, it's maybe 10, 15, 20%. But what if that's the same blinders we have on? That's just based on our own experience. We were kind of being pushed through the system, and frankly, most of the people in this room, we were the lucky ones. We were the ones whose gaps weren't so debilitating that we were able to get pretty far and be in that top 5%. But we saw our friends, our siblings, that they hit that wall in algebra, and even though they might have had the creativity to find the cure for cancer, they weren't going to get that chance. Or they might have hit a wall in physics class, and even though they might have figured out, one day how to travel faster than the speed of light, they're never going to get that chance because they couldn't pass that physics class. But what if we allow them to learn at their own time and pace, fill in those gaps, so that these things that we associate with only the top 5% really do become a lot more like basic literacy? And I don't think it's just even a nice to have. Everyone these days is talking about the issues of widening inequality, the coming artificial intelligence and automation. What's that going to do to jobs? What are, when we have self-driving cars, what are all the truck drivers going to do and all the cab drivers going to do? All the retail workers, there's going to be tens of millions of jobs. It's not just an option that we need, more people being able to be in the creative class. It's a necessity if we want all of our people to have real purpose in life. And so, it's exciting to be here, and I consider all of y'all as part of this adventure together, because I genuinely think we have the shot of where we are in time and history, of taking this thing called education, especially at a high level. It was really available to a very small number, and really just being able to participate in the knowledge economy a lot more like clean drinking water or basic shelter, and just a fundamental human right. Thank you. So thank you. We have time for questions, and I'll put this slide up here. This is my public email address, which I do actually look at. And I remind everyone we are not for profit. Sometimes people see Bill Gates and say, well, no, we have a big mission, and it is being limited by our resources. And this is a new thing we're trying, the first time ever today. The GoFundMe campaign folks came up to me and said, hey, you're always doing these talks and stuff. People must want to help. And I was like, yeah, we want them to help, but we don't know how. And so this is a way that if any of y'all are, and it would be under Team Rice, want to kind of become part of this mission, you could either contribute directly and donate directly, or it also could make you part of the team that helps you, or that helps us find more people to help support this mission. I encourage you to go there, and then that's a not so subtle Twitter post that I saw that I thought was funny. But with that, I'd love to take questions from folks. I think there's microphones. I see one there, and it looks like there's one there. Yes.
Thank you for an inspiring presentation. I just had a question about credentialing. Is that outside of the scope of Khan Academy? Because I noticed, like in the SAT score example, that was a gateway credential, or clearly a Rice degree is a gateway credential, or a GED. Could there be a Khan GED in the future, or is that testing and credentialing, is that outside the scope? Outside the scope of education?
Not at all. I actually, this is central to what we're trying to do. We're already getting pretty close to having the core learning side of Khan Academy, from early learning through the core of college. And so one thing that we're already having conversations, it'll probably take a few years for it to become something that you'll hear about, but I would love nothing more than to have a kind of a universal global credential that shows what you know, that it's competency-based. This person knows this set of skills, and it would have the value. If you're lucky enough to go to Rice, you can go most anywhere in the world and say, oh, you're got that degree from Rice with that GPA. Okay, that means something. But most universities and most of the world, especially most high schools, it carries very little information value, especially if you go to even the neighboring town. But it would be incredibly powerful if anyone on the planet could prove that they know, and that evidence is portable anywhere in the world. And I also think that would motivate a lot more sultanas to engage in that way. Because a central question for Sultana is, well, how is my learning going to lead to something? So I absolutely want to do that. I want to figure out a way for kids to get maybe even early high school, college credit for their work as well. So it's definitely something we're thinking about.
Thank you.
And I'll take 2 from here for everyone there, because it feels unbalanced for some reason. Yes?
Thanks. So first, I just want to say thank you for getting me through Lineal and differential equations. Yeah, not sure if I would have done it without it. But then as someone who went on to further math, I was a little bit heartbroken and struggled. I did okay, but to at that higher level, and then I've gone on to do applied physics research, and I've learned a ton. But I wonder, do you see sort of a future for Khan Academy and sort of the cutting edge of academics and even business for sort of ongoing past, collegiate undergrad education?
Simple answer, and I'm glad we can be of service. And simple answer is yes. And look, part of my selfish motivation for doing this, I love to geek out on this stuff. And some of the material, it's even things that, in college I learned it, or I learned it a little bit, or, I still had some questions, but I consider it a luxury of mine to be able to, hey, I'm going to teach it to other people, so let me immerse myself in this field for a few days or weeks or months to really, so, there's a personal passion where I would actually love to get much deeper in frankly, a lot of subjects. And it wouldn't just be me, it would be other people that were contributing. But I think, what happens is, there's so much to happen at kind of the K through 14 levels that we want to really flesh out, and that's where the bulk of the kids in really, gets unlocked. Because, frankly, once you get through your calculus and your linear algebra, you're a little bit off to the races at that point. And I would love to help more kids get even more advanced, because there's even a notion of like, hey, if we can get more people understanding quantum physics, whatever, the breakthroughs are going to happen faster. Like, that's a very scalable source of impact. But we'd love to get there eventually, but it's probably not, it's not on our current 1 to 2 year roadmap. But we'll definitely, we have things like macroeconomics, actually writing humanities, American history, civics and government, all at the kind of advanced high school or early college level. But I hope we can do the really advanced stuff at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you.
So you have some absolutely die-hard fans here in the audience. Several Khan millionaires and multimillionaires. We've got Acton Academy Houston.
Oh yeah, Acton Academy. Oh, awesome.
We've got some Woodlands Acton Academy folks here as well. So they're super excited. And so just on behalf of the school, I just want to thank you for what you've done, because you are a critical component to what we do and to the educational innovation that's happening here in Houston and also throughout the world. And with that, with the Khan Lab School that you have, what interesting things have you seen there, and what plans do you have for that?
Yeah, and for those of y'all who don't know, this is super cool. So the Acton Academy, started by Jeff and Laura Sandifer, they were essentially the first Khan Lab School, really. Where I remember they started the school and they said, yeah, we're actually going to create a school based on some of these ideas around mastery learning and kids charting their own track, and so that, and kind of making learning more of an adventure and a quest, and all of these notions. And so 5 or so years ago, I had written about all of these stuff in my book, One World Schoolhouse, and I was like, oh, it's one thing to think theoretically about it, but Jeff and Laura have started an incredible school, and now there's many Acton Academies. I would like to understand this deeper, because as soon as you unlock some of these things, why do you have to group students by age anymore? Why or perceived ability? Can't it unlock a lot more time for projects and whatever else? Do a competency-based system. And so, before we said, let's see if we can create a lab where we can try these ideas out, full year, full day, whatever. And so we used to go, I visited the first Acton Academy out in Austin.
You're welcome to come visit anytime.
Yeah, no, big fans. But I think, what we're learning at the lab school is, I think things that y'all have learned or we're all learning together, is that there's a theoretical ideal of mastery learning, but to actually implement it, there's a lot of, I would say, for lack of a word, deprogramming that has to occur on both the student and the adult side of things. It really takes a lot. It really takes really secure adults to be able to step back and really let kids fail sometimes. But when they do and they pick themselves, it's incredibly powerful. And we've also found that, if you start with kids when they're 5, 6 years old, but sometimes when we bring in students who are 13 or 14 years old, and these could even be kids with great grades and whatever else, they're kind of like, tell me what to do next. You're like, no, that's not how it works. Like, you're the center of it, you're owning it, you're driving it. So I think those are the two big ones. But I've learned a lot of very positive things too. You know, a lot of the theoretical ideas of when the kids, I believe a big source of teenage angst, what we call teenage angst, is this notion that, you know, evolutionarily speaking or biologically speaking, they, in theory, nature would let them reproduce. It's not a good idea, but in theory, they could. And nature would not have allowed that if they weren't capable of a lot more responsibility than we give them. And they shouldn't have that type of responsibility, but what if they had more responsibility for their peers? What if they had more responsibility over themselves? And I do see that when you give adolescents that type of responsibility, they mature much more. And I get a sense that there's a lot less bullying, a lot less angst. And I've seen, you know, my children go to our lab school, and you know, oftentimes the first responder, whether it's a knee that's been scraped or a question, is going to be another student. And they actually act like a community, like a tribe of, you know, cousins who like each other. So yeah, I'd love to learn more about what y'all are doing as well, because you know, the whole point of schools like this is that hopefully in 10 or 20 years, it's going to take some time, this becomes the norm. Absolutely.
I'm Graham from Acton Academy, Houston, and where do you see the future of Khan as a whole heading?
Yeah. So, you know, my hope is if we were to imagine Khan Academy in, let's just call it 10 years, I hope that we have, you know, those numbers that you saw before are in the billions, and it's not just billions of people who just use it once or twice to get help with something, that it's billions of people who are using it to really learn and master their concepts. And that millions of them are able to then evidence that learning with credentials that you know, aren't just nice things on a resume, but those credentials are direct bridges into economic opportunity. So you get that credential, all of the 21st century employers around the world say, yes, that person, not just even a first round interview, that person gets a third round interview. They get fast track because we know that they really know that material. I hope that we're able to go even beyond, you know, in 10 years, kind of the K through 14. You know, a lot of debates that we have in our organization is all right, we're helping people on the academic subjects that matter today in the current system. And I don't know how much you know the history of education, but you know, this notion of when students learn chemistry in the 10th or 11th grade and calculus, this comes from this committee of 10 university presidents in 1890, which was well before, you know, we even knew that DNA, you know, DNA was where our genetic data or the highway system existed. And so we're still doing those same exact courses. And so I hope that in the next 10 years, we're able to also say, well, there's other really important things that people should be exposed to that are going to make them really navigate the world and be empowered citizens. I hope that we are, that the standard of practice in classrooms are a lot closer to an Acton Academy than, you know, the systems that a lot of us grew up in, where students are at the center of it. It's competency-based. The transcript of the future looks more like, instead of it's like, here are the classes and here's the GPA, it looks like, here are your competencies that you've achieved. Here are your portfolio of creative works that you've constructed, or video, you know, it could be videos of speeches you've given, or plays, or musical instruments, and here's what your peers think of you, and on your ability to work as a team, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, if we get there in 10 years, then I feel optimistic that in 20 or 30 years, we can do, you know, I talk a lot about inverting the labor pyramid, that in the Industrial Revolution, you needed a lot of labor, you needed a good bit of information processing, which were the white-collar jobs that kind of filled up skyscrapers. And then you had a small top of the pyramid that was kind of the creative class. These were either the entrepreneurs, the owners of capital, the researchers, the doctors, the engineers. With automation collapsing those bottom two layers, we're going to have all this new wealth get created, and we're going to have tough questions as a society. Does it all accrue to the top, in which case you're going to have dramatic inequality and probably social unrest? Do you do massive redistribution, but still a lot of people are going to lack a sense of purpose? Or do you invert the pyramid? Do we educate ourselves out of it? So I hope that, you know, over the next 10, 20, 30 years that we actually can see that that is happening, that 10, 20, 30% of people are capable of being researchers and artists and whatever else, not just 5%.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. Yes. Oh, we have 5 minutes, so maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yes.
Hi, thank you for everything that you've done. I'm Matthew Morand. I'm a graduate student. Even after many years, I still find that you help me solve some problems. So my question is, I think you've touched on this a little bit with the lab schools and whatnot, but do you still find the softer skills are best for a classroom, the creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and how do you plan to work with schools to kind of, you have the information side coming through the website, but also the allow students to learn in those softer skills.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That is the value of a physical environment. You're actually around human beings. And the more that the architects of that physical space foster interaction, the better. And I'd also say, sometimes when people talk about virtual learning and all that, they'll say, well, where does the human interaction? I point out that the way the traditional academic structure, there's no explicit intention to foster the soft skills. In fact, there's a lot of sit quietly, listen, learn to sit in one place, which we know is not necessarily the trait that you want or is going to make you succeed in life. So I think the more that in physical spaces we can even name the objectives, that hey, we want kids to be more independent. We want them to show more agency. We want them to, feel comfortable being able to go into a large room and ask a question even though they're 12 or 13 years old. And then how do we give them experiences in a physical space? We want them to tutor their peers. And maybe tutoring is the highest form of mastery, that you can actually teach the subject versus just do exercises in it. I think that's exactly right. I think that's going to be the really interesting opportunity for physical spaces.
Thank you.
Yeah, one last question?
All right, just want to reiterate what everyone
sorry. Oh, sorry. I'll take you two. Okay, two more quick questions. I didn't realize there was a microphone up there. Yeah, well, I'll take it.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, thanking you for all that you've done. I kind of have a spicy question for you. So, I'm from the most illiterate city in the United States, and when I came to college, it was a huge culture shock because the focus wasn't necessarily on just learning concepts. It was on learning how to think and learning how to learn and learning how to kind of go off on your own and tackle a problem and come up with a creative solution. And to me, that's what seems to be the real value of an education. So in your goal of providing a world-class education for everybody, and I'm sure this is something you've thought about, how do you plan to sort of incorporate this idea of learning how to learn and learning how to think critically into the Khan Academy experience?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So it's, as I told Ann 12, 13 years ago, it's not like we're going to be able to solve that overnight. But the way I view it is there's a whole spectrum of skills we want students to develop. To even get to the point that you can start to really create, you do need some basic skills. And so at first, we definitely want to make sure students have that. Also, being able to use a tool like Khan Academy effectively also is almost a meta skill. It allows you to have more agency over your learning, and for you to say, oh wait, I'm trying to do something, let me pull that knowledge or pull that knowledge. So I think there's actually another very important aspect where just the nature of these online tools help build a muscle that wasn't getting built before. But above and beyond that, the simple, a little bit of a cop-out answer is hopefully we can liberate physical classrooms to do more of that. But I also hope, going back to the tenure question, that we also can do things like, if I imagine 5, 10 years from now, if there was projects on Khan Academies, ways to show your portfolio, we actually do have a coding platform on Khan Academy that is like that, where you have a portfolio and you can create things and then you can branch off of other people's work. There was an idea earlier today of how can we create communities of learners. So that's all, stuff I would dream about doing if we can get there at some point. So one last question from upstairs, because I've been ignoring you all day.
Hi, so I was a 2012 grad, so you came to speak at my graduation here. So
my apologies.
No, it was great. It was great. My mom uses you every day because she heard you during my speech. But my question is, with 14,000 contributors in the different or the multi-language space, how do you ensure that you are getting the same quality of education that, say, your team here in the United States is doing?
That's an excellent question. We're trying, and it's a debate of moving fast and then ensuring the quality. The not so great thing, but I guess this is that in English there's actually I wasn't the first person to make math content either. There's always a lot of stuff, so it's a vibrant community. So English speakers have a lot of choice in what they use. But in most languages, Farsi, Arabic, Pashto, Gujarati, Swahili, there's nothing. And so we are trying to find people that we think are pretty solid. We do have a vetting mechanism, and then we do have some type of kind of a review mechanism. But we do want to get that out as fast as possible, because right now there's nothing in most of those geographies. And frankly, those are the geographies where a lot of people don't even have schools, or even the way that teaching happens is even more lecture-based and very rote versus I think how we're doing it. So yeah, it's a central question. I think it's a central question as you general skill as an organization. How do we scale our impact without losing the charm and the fun and the ethos of a small kind of homebrew family project? So with that, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So I'd like to conclude just with three brief thank yous. First, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, particularly those from outside the Rice community, whether you're young students in our community or advanced learners. Part of our mission is to bring the community into Rice, and we want to thank you for that. Second, I want to join Sal in thanking our Rice University trustee Ann Dorr for making this possible, and also for feeding Sal's family at a critical time. And last and most important, we want to thank Sal Khan. It would have been easy for him to say, sorry, I got sick last fall and I couldn't come, and he's busy, and that could have been the end of it. It was our immense privilege to have you as a commencement speaker. I didn't know it's actually your first, if that was true, and so I want to take Rice University to take full credit for putting you on the stage, and in return extract a promise that it will not be another 6.5 years before you return to Rice University. Thank you so much for an extraordinary presentation.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.